should you look for when considering which style of Tai Chi to learn? Are there major differences between the different schools, or do they share more than they would like to admit? And does your school offer a range of learning techniques for the different ways we all learn? Find out in part 1 of It's All About Style with the Teapot Monk. Hi everybody, and welcome back to this two-part series in the Talking Tai Chi podcast. This week and next we are talking about style and seeing if we can glean anything useful from the generally accepted definitions and distinctions of one style over another. So let's begin by asking, what are the main styles of Tai Chi? Well, there are 3 main styles found across the world: Yang, Chen and Wu. Yet for the beginner seeking clarity, perhaps such nuances are of less importance than for the stylists themselves. For within each of these is a multitude of variations that do little but confuse the picture for a new student of Tai Chi. In fact, I'm not convinced that they are that important for the teachers either. As Mao said, "Let 100 flowers bloom." And were we to encourage this approach in the broad church that is Tai Chi, we would perhaps see an even greater diversity of styles that could address the needs of all those who tread the floors of our esteemed training halls around the world, and not just the needs of those who have defined in stone such definitions. But I digress. Or do I? Unquestionably, in the world of Tai Chi, certain names and schools dominate the practice and the public image of the art. Some styles are seen as more traditional and pure, others as more recent developments with unproven modifications, whilst others still are seen as outdated or increasingly antiquated. Although you may think that at the beginning, selecting the right school is paramount, most styles do in fact share more in common than their practitioners would probably care to admit. So rather than fixate on names and categories, it might be better to remember that it is the teacher and the ambience of a class that will determine much of a student's progress, rather than simply the name of a style or possibly a dubious historical timeline. For every teacher will place a different emphasis on some aspects of a form over others, some aspects of training over others, and in time these will ultimately distinguish their style from those of their contemporaries. This is the nature of teaching, and it is part of Tai Chi's rich legacy and development over the centuries. Some may deny it, others may embrace it, but rest assured you will always find in a class the fundamentals of the form: pushing hands, rooting, breathing, qigong, sticking, yielding, and if you're lucky, a bit of swordplay. I know you're asking, yes, but tell me the fundamental differences between Chen and Yang, for example. Well, I'd have to refer you back to the beginning of this podcast and my thoughts on teachers and ambience. But if you insist, you could say that the Chen style, from which all others are said to have derived, still incorporates both fast and slow movements, as well as explosive and soft techniques. Other styles have levelled out these variations and tend to offer a more uniform pace in their forms and practice. The official modified Chinese form and the original Yang style have a much more regular flow and incorporate lower postures and angular stances. Other styles such as Wudan still teach much of the martial side, whilst the popular Chen Manqing form, on the other hand, tend to perhaps balance more the martial with other softer aspects. This is notable in the form's upright stances, softer moves, and consistent flow with an emphasis on circularity. But At the end of the day, what's in a name? Who was it who said about the martial arts, "It's just a name, don't fuss over it. There's no such thing as a style if you understand the roots"? What was this fellow's name? Bruce something, Bruce Tree, Bruce Knee, oh well, I can't remember now. Anyway, one thing we must all remember when we talk about styles is that we are talking about teaching preferences. A good teacher from one style will help us in evaluating the practice by means of an approach that makes sense to us. Such perceptions then form the foundations of our learning style. But not enough teachers take the approach of finding out how best we learn. For example, learning studies have been carried out for decades on how best we learn, and according to one model, the Fleming's VAC model, we learn either as visual, audible or tactile students. That's to say, some of us learn best by watching and doing. For example, a teacher may demonstrate a move and then we would copy it. I had a Chinese teacher in London many years ago that spoke not a word of English, and so I had to learn the sword form from him using just this learning skill. Others learn better by listening and having something explained well before mastering it. For example, the concept of yielding or rooting may be easier to explain for some people than merely demonstrating it. Doing is fine, but if someone needs to understand and not just copy and paste, then the listening factor must be taken into account. Finally, another group learns best by actively trying as opposed to simply copying or conceptualizing. So, for example, demonstrating good posture may be insufficient in itself for this type of student, nor chatting about alignment between knee, hips and shoulders. What is needed for these students is a teacher that can align them physically through contact and continual fine adjustment. So, a good teacher will have techniques at his or her disposal according to the type of student you are. Now, should you ask your teacher before signing up, "Excuse me, which of Fleming's VAC models will you be prioritising in the training hall?" Probably yes, you should, but will you get a sensible answer? Probably no. So what should you be asking? Well, you'll have to wait for next week to find out. And for those of you curious as to where the usual music has gone this week, don't worry, it'll return next week. This week is Holy Week here in Spain, and although I lean more towards atheism than Catholicism, the sounds, smells and sights infuse my every breath during the week. So I thought it only fair to share some culture and traditions whilst I systematically deconstruct others. Enjoy the sounds. Otherwise, join me here next week for part 2 on Talking Tai Chi with the Teapot Monk. Looking to discover what Tai Chi can do for you, or curious and would like to know a little more? Well, just come over to 21stcenturytaichi.com. Look for the link in the show notes. There's short introductory courses, breathing, health, Tai Chi form, sword, philosophy applications and more, plus books, PDFs and great videos and even music. Got a question? Track me down on social media as the Teapot Monk. Thanks for listening.